Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Andrew Davis. Welcome to Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I introduce my guest, I don't think my guest needs any introduction. I do want to remind everybody that you need to support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest's comic, and in particular, my guest's comic right now for what's going on with it, or corporate media. I personally do not care as long as you're supporting something you love and you want to see it get made more of. You should be supporting it, and you should be supporting it financially. But enough about that, because I have with me Mike Barron, who is always doing something interesting, to say the least.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of stuff going on, and you have a very interesting situation on your hands with a very interesting book, The Private American. And I'm not exactly sure how I should approach this, because I don't want to take away from the book itself, because it looks amazing. But there's another situation that's sort of unfolding with it at the same time that is just as interesting, where you are delisted / not searchable on Indiegogo, yet the book is almost a little under 30,000. So I don't really know why you're delisted, because your book isn't
Well,
that.
I know why. I know why we're being shadow banned. And if you play the trailer, everybody watching will know instantly.
Well, I don't want to get myself into trouble here too much, but obviously, I mean, I don't think your book is that controversial, though.
No, it's not, but it is to a certain segment of the public. And in case people are curious and aren't familiar with it, it's about the southern border. And that's why we've been shadow banned.
Yeah, so let's talk about your book a little bit before we get into the whole shadow ban thing. It's basically, my understanding of your book is that it's dealing with the fact that, obviously, and it's no secret that things come through the southern border: drugs, guns, obviously sex trafficking, a variety of other things comes through there, and it's been coming through for a very long time. And obviously, it's gotten to the point where this private citizen, and I think of his friend of his, are sort of now taking matters into their own hands to try to deal with that issue. And then basically the cartels don't like it, and they're trying to take out these two vigilantes.
Well, that's true. It's the Punisher on the southern border, but it's not just the cartels. It's the United States government that's trying to wipe them out in this one. Because, as you know, the situation was created artificially. No organism can survive, neither a single cell nor a nation, without protecting its borders. Everybody on any border state will tell you that it's a disaster. What little news comes through simply amplifies that point. I believe that 750 people have died from fentanyl overdose this year, and 2 million people have flowed across the southern border thus far this year. Far many than the government can handle or take care of, although they're doing their best. But it's a slap in the face to everybody who immigrated to this country legally. And it's a kick in the nuts to civilization, because civilization cannot survive without the rule of law. You're either for the rule of law or you're against it.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting, because obviously this is extremely topical right now. It was topical under the Trump presidency. It's even more topical, I think, under Joe Biden. Obviously, we're going to get me into a little bit of trouble, but this is on the ballot in November, in a few days. And so what is this like? Because your book is hitting, much like Thin Blue Line hit, a very topical, area. And it's very interesting now, because we're in a stage where I don't want to say it's safe to write about this, but it's acceptable to write about this, and people want graphic novels and comics and media to deal with this now, where 10 years ago I don't think that existed. And so what is that like too? Because it's very political, and comics have always been political, but now they're political, if that makes any sense.
Well, yes and no. It's topical. And I have to stress that first and foremost, my goal is to entertain. And this story is one of the most entertaining stories you'll ever read. You pick it up and you won't be able to put it down after you read the first page. I know how to do that. I know how to grab the reader by the throat. And that's my goal, is to drag him into the narrative to the exclusion of all else. It's a gripping, exciting story, first and foremost. There are no speeches. There are no bumper stickers. And the fact that this is controversial now just shows how far this country has fallen from its heyday of liberty and prosperity.
Yeah, I read Thin Blue Line, and obviously, Thin Blue Line is a very packed adventure story, and I viewed it as the type of story where it was just two cops trying to get home after a crazy situation that erupted. And so that's how I viewed Thin Blue Line, and they're trying to protect the mayor, and they're trying to just get out of a really, really bad situation, and you don't know what's going to happen, and it's extremely suspenseful. And obviously, this story is also that to some degree, where you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know if these two guys are going to survive this, and even what happens after, and what's they're going to deal with. And then obviously there's this issue at the forefront. And I think it's so interesting because this is a hell of a lot more interesting than what Marvel's putting out, what DC's putting out, what Image is putting out. And I think that's also what you've done really nicely as well, is that, people want to escape in comics, but they also want the realism.
I'm at a point in my life when, in order for me to enjoy an entertainment, either a novel or a movie, I have to believe that it's real. And that doesn't preclude the fantastic, because both Alien and Aliens fall under that category. I watch those movies and I believe every word in them because they're internally consistent and they make me believe. They take themselves seriously. But a lot of movies these days erupt into fantasy firefights with hundreds of thousands of nameless assassins. I'm thinking of Nobody, who stars a guy that was Better Call Saul, Bob Odenkirk. He seems like a normal suburban father when we meet him, but it turns out that he's actually a retired CIA agent. And that's the theme with so many movies these days. But in Odenkirk's case, in the case of Nobody, he ends up shooting down hundreds of nameless, faceless assassins with machine guns. The police never show up. It's ridiculous. So they lost me as a fan. They lost me because I didn't believe it. I said, this is fantasy. It started out so well. You could believe it, and then it just descends into fantasy. And I prefer a story where I believe every word.
Yeah, what is that like? Because I feel at this point as a reader, I'm a big manga fan. And what I find with manga is that there's finalization when they kill a character in most mangas, not all of them. There's one in particular called Dragon Ball where everybody comes back to life, like every, 5 issues, essentially. But even with One Piece, like I believe One Piece is so outrageous. They're on a boat. It's not, they're not on a globe. But I believe every little thing when they're in a fight, and I believe every word. And to me, it almost has finalization and realness to it. And the show takes itself at a certain level. And so that's why I'm a fan of a show like One Piece and the manga One Piece. But then I'm now reading something like Batman. And to me, we've gone so far off. And as a creator, and as somebody who obviously you did really well with Thin Blue Line, and you're going to do well with this, whether it's on Indiegogo or it's elsewhere, it's real. And I believe what's going on with these characters. I believe that they're actually people and they're not the mythos of, a character, if that makes any sense. And so
well, it does. I like to write stories about real people. And everything that happens in the book is credible. It could happen. There are no superheroics. There's no superheroes, science fiction, monsters, none of that stuff. I try to make it as realistic as possible. And I try to emulate movies that do that well, like The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, which I think is a masterpiece of its form. The Vigilante movie, probably the best Vigilante movie I've ever seen. And it makes me wonder why they can't make a decent Punisher movie. It's so simple. It really is so simple. And I've seen every Punisher movie, and they just they don't take themselves seriously enough. They don't make the effort to make it seem absolutely credible. The TV show was better. the one starring John Bernthal. That was a lot better, but even then they lost me at the end.
So let me ask you a question, and then obviously I want to swing back to your book, but I am curious, do you feel like that's sort of the problems with comic book stuff right now? Is that they have a character, and these characters have been well fleshed out, and some of these characters are immaculate. You know, the Punisher is a good example of that. I mean, I think Civil War Punisher is arguably the best Punisher that's ever been done in Marvel, especially when him and Cap are disagreeing and he's continuing the fight underground in a lot of ways. You know, I mean, that's a well fleshed out character, but then they bring it to the MCU, whether it's Disney or on the big screen, and then they started off decently, I feel, but then they completely mess it up. And do you feel like that's part of the problem, is that they go and they take something and they basically say, hey, now we're going to make them have an unrealistic action?
Well, I have to confess that I don't read many corporate comics these days. Every now and then I'll pick one up and read it, and invariably I'm disappointed. I don't think they entertain. I think that's the main fault, is that the writers that they're hiring don't know how to entertain. They don't know how to write a gripping story, and they substitute their pet cause for whatever. What you get is a lecture. And we've all seen those comic book pages where the art is nearly obscured behind word balloons and captions as the writer makes his, her, or its case for whatever it is they're trying to trumpet. And work has to take itself seriously before the audience will take itself seriously. And also, you have to know how to craft that kind of story so that the epiphanies, the oh shit moments, rise organically from the narrative that you've laid down and from the personalities of your characters. To me, the best ending comes as both a complete surprise and, in retrospect, inevitable. And if you want an example, the end of the original Planet of the Apes.
I enjoyed that. I mean, I love the fact that they're out on the beach and then they see the Statue of Liberty, and then it slowly hits him what has happened.
Yep.
And it doesn't just happen. They're just riding, and you think they're going off in the sunset, and then the statue appears, and then he's like, I forget the exact line, but it's, to paraphrase, he's like, we did this to ourselves. Like, look what man did to ourselves. And it's brilliant. And I mean, I think I love that movie. I love the first one. I thought, you know, the second one was pretty good too. And I'm not going to lie, like anytime any of them, like the old stuff's on, it's great. And while the new stuff was good and entertaining, it was not as prolific, I feel.
No, I've seen a couple of the new Planet of the Apes movies, and I was impressed. I'm talking about Rise, the Planet of the Apes, the one where they focus on the main ape, and they're very well done, and they're very credible within their own universe.
No, I absolutely agree. And then to swing it back to your book, obviously, I mean, you're under 30,000. I've said this off air and I'll say it on air. I think you should be doing more like 60,000, if not higher, just because of who you are, Thin Blue Line, the topicalness of the issue, the fact that I think people are starved for this. I really think people are starved for content like this. I think that this starvation has started about 12 years ago with Breitbart when they did Clinton Cash. I really believe that.
Breitbart said politics is downstream from culture, and that was exactly right. And conservatives don't seem to understand this, and so they don't embrace conservative culture. They're too busy making money as entrepreneurs or whatever. But the left understands this, and we see the fruits today as they took over education, entertainment, the media, and politics 50 years ago, starting their long march through the culture of the West, destroying everything as they went. And now today we're reaping the bitter fruit of their efforts because they take culture seriously. And if we're ever to reclaim this culture, we have to take it seriously as well. Now, there are bright spots. I mean, you look at Top Gun Maverick, is the fourth or fifth highest grossing film of all time now. It doesn't preach, you know, it tells a story. It shows. And I have three rules. Number one is entertain. Number two is show, don't tell. And number three is be original. But show, don't tell may be the most important one. because a storyteller who knows how to show, as opposed to explaining with endless speeches and so forth, he will win the audience over if he shows in an innovative and exciting way. And a perfect example of that was the introduction of most Better Call Saul episodes, which was usually a 5-minute wordless sequence where the camera just roams and the audience follows the camera and says, what's going on here? It's interesting, but I'm not sure yet. But by the end of the sequence, it becomes absolutely clear what the camera is doing. And then you say, aha, isn't that a great way to find out about that?
Yeah, no, I think that, I'm right now in the middle of watching the old Criminal Intent, Law and Order stuff, and they sort of show the main suspects of who committed the murder, but they don't tell you who committed the murder. And I think it's really well done in a lot of ways, especially the early episodes, because they're showing certain elements of saying, here's who could have potentially done it, but they're not showing you everything. And then it's slowly unfolding, but they're showing you, how they analysis the crime scene. And I think it's absolutely brilliant because it's more of, they're keeping me intrigued to say, okay, we have 4 suspects who did it and why did they do it? And then every once in a while, it's not any of those original 4 suspects who are in the opening scene and before they show the credits. And it's absolutely wonderful. But again, I absolutely agree because I think that, there's been obviously a march on culture and we're seeing a lot of stuff happen with that. And I think that there's a lot of people who have now become, who are in a certain camp that have become more centered. And I think that they want other content because people have been pushed out from the left in a lot of ways right now. And that doesn't mean they're pushed into the right, but they're almost politically homeless. And they're saying, I agree with certain elements, but I feel more people today are purple than ever before.
Well, my first goal is to entertain, as I always say. And these 2 projects back to back, Thin Blue Line and Private American, are anomalies compared to my usual fare, which is science fiction with Nexus, or humor with Buddy McGill, or Florida Man. But I always say I don't choose my stories choose me. It just reading about the southern border night after night and seeing the video, the people pouring across and reading the statistics of the people who have died from fentanyl poisoning and the number of criminals who have been let loose into the country and the number of untested, we're not free. If we don't get the jab, a lot of people were fired. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people lost their job because they refused to get the vaccine. But 2 million people from God knows where pour across the southern border, and the government flies them all over the country in the dead of night without bothering to check them or give them vaccinations. Makes you wonder.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions and, too many questions for this show for an hour at the very least. But even going into that too, because obviously, your book touches upon this stuff and really sort of doesn't directly go into this. Obviously, it's meant to entertain. It's dealing with the southern border. But one of the problems with your book right now, and you didn't cause it, I didn't cause it, is Indiegogo has an issue with it.
Yes, it's being shadow banned. And that means if you go to the Indiegogo site and you type in the Private American, it doesn't come up. You can search all day, it won't come up. If you type my name in, you'll get all the other campaigns, but not mine. Now, we've asked Indiegogo repeatedly to explain this, and they haven't responded. And we've found other campaigns on Indiegogo that are grotesque in their display of perverted sexuality, bestiality, and violence. And those are fine. There's also a campaign called Fuck Trump that's live on Indiegogo. That's fine. But mine is being shadow banned, even though it contains no obscenity or no extreme violence. And the reason is obvious. Because it's about the southern border, and that's a forbidden subject. They don't want us to discuss it.
And so this is one of the things that I think is really interesting is that obviously I'm a free speech absolutist, but what that really means is that free speech, for those who don't know, only applies on a legal level between a government and its citizens. It does not apply between private companies and individuals. Right now, you are not engaging any free speech. We are engaging in the principles of free speech. I'm not going to censor you. You can say whatever you want. But now the government, if they said you and me can't speak, that would be a violation of our freedom of speech on a citizen governmental right. But I do think what they're doing is wrong. I also don't know if it's a contractual issue per se, because it seems to me that if you're paying Indiegogo a fee, that you're paying them a fee for a reason. And so that's what I don't understand. And if they don't like your project, they shouldn't have approved it, but they shouldn't be taking your money still, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, and we're on the trail. We're looking for somebody who will respond to us, and we're getting some help, from some important people. And I hope we're going to have an announcement next week, and that they'll lift the shadow ban. But even if they don't, we're going to continue to push the book because it's a good book. In fact, it's going to be the most exciting comic you read all year. It's going to be a book you're going to read over and over again. If you want to think of it in a certain way, it's The Punisher on the southern border. And one of the reasons I did it is I always love vigilante characters. And I wanted to do a Punisher-like story, and that's what this is.
Yeah, and to even talk about that too, because to me, I mean, I didn't even know you had a book, to be very honest, out there. And then I was on Pops Van Zandt's show, and we were talking about it, and he brought it up. I know that, I think the guy who does Frog G is also shadow banned on, Indiegogo. Then he mentioned you, and then obviously you were on for Thin Blue Line, and then I think there's a few others as well. And so I'm like, oh snap, this is a real problem, because obviously my version is that I want more speech, not less of it, because I think the good ideas always win, and every once in a while a bad idea wins. But statistically, if you have 40 ideas in a room, the best one will come out on top for the most part.
Hopefully.
It usually works itself out. I'm being very optimistic here, but it usually works itself out. But what is this like too? Because obviously, I don't know how much Thin Blue Line did on Indiegogo, but I know it did well, and then I think it did.
They didn't shadow ban Thin Blue Line,
but I think it's a good basis. At least that's where I'm going with this. Is that I think it's a good basis that if you did like 60,000 with Thin Blue Line, I think that's where this book should be, around that number too. On a very, very conservative level.
Oh, I agree. I think we'd be doing a lot better if they'd lift the shadow ban, but I'm getting invaluable support from Comicsgate, and a number of Comicsgate characters say that their campaigns are shadow banned as well. But they're doing a lot better business than me, and the reason is that their books are spectacular. They explode off the page when I look at them. I say, I got to get that art. Whereas Private American, which is exquisitely drawn by Richard Bonk, just beautifully drawn. It's a crime tale. And I compare it to The Punishers, on which I worked. It's very similar to them in tone, in artistic quality. I mean, Richard Bonk just nails it. Do you have the video handy?
I do not have the video handy. I could try to pull it up, but my computer's been wonky lately.
Oh, yeah. Well, anybody who's interested, it's theprivateamerican.com. Theprivateamerican.com.
The link is in the description above or down below. I'll put it to the comments down as well. And I mean, I've watched the trailer, and it's a pretty intense trailer, for lack of a better word. But it's beautifully well done, the trailer. But yeah, even to go into the idea of the shadow band as well. What has this even been like for you? Because obviously I don't think you've ever been through this, and it's kind of a weird thing when you get hit hard, and then you're obviously live, and then you're not live per se.
Well, I've been people have attempted to cancel me before, and I've been the subject of intense internet hate campaigns from people I never heard of. But I've learned a few lessons from that. And one is never apologize, and two, never acknowledge them. Here we go.
Yeah. Here we go. Hopefully, we're going to play it and we're not going to get canceled here.
No.
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
And so to even talk about that, because I mean, that trailer, it kind of says it all, I feel, of what you're going to get, what this book is about, what this book is not about, and even the story that is sort of dropping down in this and where we're going with it in a lot of ways too. And I feel like this is the advantage over some of the other people, who may or may not be shadow banned, because there's been some, interesting things about that as well. But your trailer, I think, sort of kicks their asses. Trailer. No offense to them.
Well, I have the advantage of working with Chris Brawley, who's a videographer, and he puts those trailers together. And Chris is a brilliant marketer, brilliant. And that's why the videos for my graphic novels are the best you'll ever see on the internet. Everybody loves them. And the next one that we're doing is for Bronze Star, which is a supernatural Western. We don't anticipate any difficulty with that. It's completely apolitical. It takes place in the 19th century. But I can't wait to see the trailer that he puts together for it, because he keeps getting this guy who sounds exactly like Sam Elliott to narrate them, and we couldn't be happier. For all I know, it could be Sam Elliott.
Yeah, so to even talk about this too, because there's a big debate going on. I'm curious your thoughts on this as well. Some people say you need a trailer. Some people say I don't need a trailer for whether it's Indiegogo or Kickstarter. I think that argument, I don't think either platform goes one way or the other on that, on a trailer issue. And I'm curious how you feel about that, because I've seen people do really well without trailers, and I've seen people do really well with trailers. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that, because Thin Blue Line had a great trailer. This has a great trailer. And I think this helps, but I also believe that a shitty trailer, for lack of a better word, can screw up your Kickstarter or your Indiegogo just the same as a good one can help it beyond belief.
I agree. And I would caution creators not to use rap in their video.
And so even going back to what's going on with Indiegogo, I mean, this is one of the things that I've figured out, is that people have said they have been shadow banned on Indiegogo, and then I go and type their name into Indiegogo and their stuff pops up. And so again, I don't really know much about this. I am very neutral, where I am not Comicsgate. I am not the other side. I speak to everybody and everybody who I find interesting. I don't just speak in comics. I speak to a lot of wrestlers, a lot of cosplayers, a lot of voice actors. And I'm just here as an interviewer, and I'll interview anybody and everybody. As long as you show up and you're polite and you don't attack me, we'll have a lovely conversation. But what is that like? Because I think some of it has been, crying wolf, but I think some of it has been true too. Because I've seen, obviously Shane Davis's campaign is shadow banned, but then I look at somebody else's, and I don't want to call them out, publicly, but they said their campaign was shadow banned, and then 5 minutes later, I looked at it and it wasn't. So, I mean, what is this like? Because it's kind of tricky at this point. And I'm curious your thoughts on all that.
as you know, these tech lords who offer us these wonderful social forums on the internet are highly political. And they always say, well, we're a private company. We can do whatever we want. But there's an element of trust there. And there's also the fact that some of these forums, such as Facebook and Twitter, are so vast and all pervasive that they have become part of the public sphere. And so they do have an obligation to represent all sides. And of course, that doesn't mean they have to show obscenity or grotesque violence or violence against certain classes. That's understandable if they want to remove that. But again, I have to stress that 10 or 20 years ago, there would be nothing controversial about private American, except, of course, the situation didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago. And if you ask Americans, what are the top three concerns that they have? Number one, inflation. Number two, crime. Number three, the southern border.
The southern border, drugs coming in,
Absolutely, because it's part of this number two, which is this grotesque explosion of crime throughout the country, especially in blue cities, due to their decisions to drop cash bail, for example, and that was the subject of Thin Blue Line to a certain extent, which was inspired by me watching TV in the summer of 2020 and watching city after city burn down, thousands of small businesses wiped out and destroyed, hundreds of people murdered, and always out front some idiot saying these are mostly peaceful protests. And then politicians, elected officials who took an oath to upswear the Constitution started to call for defunding the police. And it seemed insane to me, just insane. I mean, the opposite of rationality and Western civilization. It's like there's a war on against Western civilization, and it's being waged by our own government.
It's very interesting. It's very complicated. Again, obviously, I think that things have gotten way out of control. I think rational thought in America has disappeared. I believe the idea that if you disagree with somebody, you used to be able to go to the local pub, you would grab a beer, they would grab a beer, and you'd be able to discuss the differences, and you would both be able to walk out without being at each other's throats.
Ideally, and the other thing is you don't try to destroy that person's livelihood. What's up, Toots?
I'm going to the grocery store.
Bye. She's going to the grocery store, but she'll be back.
But what is, I have friends who are Democrats, I have friends who are Republican, and I speak to a lot of people, and a lot of people I interview have different political opinions than me, but they don't try to destroy my lives. Every once in a while, somebody tries to destroy my life on, Twitter, and then I get suspended for a week. And then I realize how good my life is that I'm not on Twitter for a week. And then I'm like, oh man, do I really want to come back? And then I realize that I need to come back because it's good for business. But for the most part, people who disagree with me do not try to destroy my life.
Right.
And we get along.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very lost art in America right now. I think it's a problem. And I think that, places like the Daily Wire, are slowly taking back the culture. I think they're trying to get somewhat back to that ground. But I think it's going to be a good 30 to 40 years before this country is back on the idea that if you're on the right and your friend's on the left, you could go into a bar or even a stranger and you could talk about an issue and grab a beer, and maybe he gets the first round, you get the second round, and you leave both relatively happy and you're not trying to kill each other or costing each other your jobs.
Well, this is one of the huge downsides of the technological revolution and the internet in general, is that it allows trolls to attack others with immunity and impunity. And one need only look at this practice of so-called swatting, where somebody who hates your guts, whom you've never even heard of before, will call the police in your hometown and complain that there's a hostage situation at your house, hoping the police will show up and shoot you. And it's happened to a number of candidates for office recently, all of whom just coincidentally happen to be Republican.
I'll give you a crazier story. You know who Tim Pool is, right?
Yeah.
Tim Pool got swatted live when he was doing a show. And so he's doing a live show on YouTube and they swatted. Now, obviously, it's Tim Pool. They came in, he had to excuse himself from basically the broadcast for maybe 5 minutes, and it became an issue. And it's a real problem. And what I think people don't realize is that whatever you use against person A, if that's the rules, it will be used against you. And it's a very complicated issue. And I think it's only a matter of time, and I think it's an issue. And I think that, I don't disagree that it's a problem.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully, there's going to be a huge course correction next week because these politicians, once again, I have to emphasize, these are people who are elected to high public office who took an oath to uphold the Constitution and called for defunding the police. And they've done everything they can to destroy and discourage the police. Thousands have walked off the job or retired. Police suicides are way up. Many were fired because they refused to get the vax. And now you have cities like Seattle and Portland where nobody dares go downtown because crime is completely out of control and business after business is leaving. And that's where we expect to see some upsets on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think Tuesday is going to be a very interesting day, and I think that a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised. I think that New York is going to be a very interesting state on Tuesday. I think that people are going to be fascinated, and I think that there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen in this country. And I think that obviously, I think America is very progressive, and I think it's a good thing. And I think the United States collectively has gotten better, in 200 plus years. But I do think that we are at a pivotal point where we are going to be turning a corner, and then we're going to correct and then turn a corner and correct. And hopefully, things are going to get better in this country. And I think that, it's going to be interesting. And I think your book really touches upon that too, because you said it really well, where you need to secure your borders first. And that's not to say America is not a welcoming country. I think America is one of the most welcoming countries. And I think that, and it's just my views on America, people and mothers in particular who are pregnant die to have their kids born in this country. And one of the rights as an American that most Americans do not realize is if you get kidnapped overseas, the FBI will negotiate to get your ass back here. And that is an American privilege. That is not, every country does not have the same privilege. If you are an American citizen, they're going to negotiate. Whether they get you back here or not, that's up for the negotiation part of it. But the FBI will negotiate back for you. Whether they succeed or not, they will go up to bat for you. That is an American right as a citizen. And that's why
one hopes. Hang on again. I gotta mute the garage door.
So I mean, it's the idea though that is, you're right. And I was listening to Chris Voss talk about this, and I think that's one of the things. And so I believe that your book touches upon this, and I think it's great. And I think it's also very insulting to people who are waiting in line for everybody who has to really cross the border.
It's absurd. And unfortunately, the FBI has forfeited all trust. There's hardly a person in the country that believes that they are honest and forthright. They have become the enforcement arm of the current political regime.
To some degree, but I make the argument, if you listen to Chris Voss, who was the lead FBI hostage negotiator, and he obviously runs Black Swan, which is a great company, super, super interesting. They teach corporate training and negotiation and a variety of other things. And, obviously being former FBI and being in a very prominent position, he is, in my opinion, the road to restoration. In a lot of ways, I'm very optimistic about it. And he's kind of like Jocko in a lot of ways, where you listen to Jocko about Navy SEALs, that's the prime example of what I use. And I have faith. Let's put it that way. I'm very optimistic. I'm very, positive where I think that there are a lot of good people still left in the FBI, and I think that there is a point of restoration, and I have faith is all I'm going to say on that point.
Well, I hope that we have not plunged over the cliff, and we'll find out next week. But again, it's not. I don't want to wallow in politics, even though the book is of necessity political. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It's just common sense that you obey the rule of law. Civilization can't exist without it. That's why the United States was the greatest country on earth, because we unleashed the power of the individual, and we treated each person as an individual, and we put a great deal of stock in individual initiative. So you had a nation of strivers who built great things. There's an old saying, strong men build good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. And right now we're in the weak man stage of the United States. In fact, one way of looking at it is it's a miracle that it lasted as long as it did. And we are very grateful to have lived in an era where we had relative freedom. And by freedom, I meant you can get in your car and go. Because the car is the spirit, the symbol of American freedom. It's a big country. You can't take a subway to Montana. And people wouldn't want to take a subway to Montana. They don't even dare take the subway in New York, because hardly a day goes by without another murder in the subways. And that's what they're fighting. But this move to force everyone into an electric vehicle, it makes no sense. It's like California simultaneously says you must buy an electric vehicle and you dare not charge it because we don't have the power grid. I mean, it's just insane. And this is what happens when you elect professional politicians. Nobody should be allowed to run for office who hasn't worked in the private sector, met a payroll, worked with his hands for a living, or knows or doesn't know regular blue collar people, because today's politicians are so completely out of touch that they refuse to address these issues. But I was going to say something that it's not all.
I'm not censoring you at all.
No,
and you
no,
know
no.
I'm not going to edit any of this out. So
That's
you know me. I mean, in the last 10 years, the only thing I've ever edited out of an interview is ums and ahs. And every once in a while, something should not be said. That's a total tangent.
Right. I understand that, and I respect it, because I have a good friend, Mike S. Miller, who has a podcast, and Mike's a devout Christian, and he does not want to hear any four-letter words on his broadcast, which I have learned. But I want to talk about my next project, which is Bronze Star, Supernatural Western.
But I do want to show the covers of the book before we get into the next project.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So this is the standard, which I think is 25. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is it a hardcover or a softcover book?
It's a soft cover.
And then this is, I think, Steve Root, I want to say.
That's right.
And then I always get this name wrong.
Dan Lawless.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, in which I know this one I think is 25 and this one is 25. I don't know what price this one's at.
Well, I believe it's going to be at the same tier. It's a pretty simple campaign. We do have some stretch goals. We're going to include cards of the covers, which will all be autographed. And there's one opening left for somebody, if they want to be a character in the comic, they can buy that perk. We did that with Thin Blue Line. It was very successful.
And so I do want to ask another question. I mean, how far are you done this? Because this is one of the things that drives me crazy. It's one of my pet peeves. So I am very frustrated openly about this in comics, where I backed the book about a year ago, and the book was supposed to be in my hands in May. And the book is now, I don't have my book. There's no updates about it. It was a Kickstarter. The book didn't do what it should have done. Whatever happened, it just didn't hit. And the way I view it, and it's just my opinion, is that the further you get away from your deadline, the less likely I am to get the book. And that's
yes and no. Anybody who's backed my projects knows that I deliver. We delivered Thin Blue Line ahead of time. We delivered Florida Man on time.
But you know what I'm asking, right? There's a reason why I'm asking this, because I trust that you're going to deliver, and I have Florida Man actually from previews. So I didn't get it through crowdfunding. because I didn't even know it existed. And then I
Right.
wound up finding it later. I'm like, oh man, it's in previews on midtown.com. Super cool. I'm gonna go pick that up. And I think it's great. I know it went just into second printing, I think, which is cool.
Well,
So
we're about to begin work on the second Florida Man graphic novel, which is even funnier than the first. Very
I,
excited about it.
I read the first one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I found it to be entertaining. It's the type of thing that I do not want to show anybody under the age of 18.
Let me see
Nothing
what I
against
got.
you. I have a niece, and she's like 3 months old. She's not seeing that till she's at least 16.
Well, that's fine. I don't blame you. I'm looking if I have any down here. No, I don't. Because, some of the covers are okay. But insofar as fulfilling a campaign, we launched a campaign about, I think it was 2 years ago, that Nexus, Lone Star, Bigfoot Bill crossover. And it just languished until a couple of months ago when I started cracking the whip. And I started getting on everybody's case relentlessly, day after day. And here it is. It's being fulfilled right now. It's late. I apologize to our backers for its lateness, but you're going to get it and you're going to love it.
Because this is my thing, is that it drives me crazy, because how am I supposed to feel as a consumer and putting trust in your project
Absolutely.
and making your dream come true? And look, if you're late, you know what the magic words are? I'm sorry, ... Because if you say, hey, I'm sorry, my anger dissipates by at least 50%. So if I'm at a level 10 anger, if you say, hey, I'm sorry, my anger goes down to a 5.
Yeah, but most importantly, you have to deliver, and we are delivering. This reminds me of the stupid bicycle I invested in over 2 years ago, the Super Strata. It's going to be computer printed out of carbon fiber, the lightest bicycle ever. And it's 2 years later, and they keep promising, and there's no bicycle. Hardly anyone in the United States has gotten their bicycle because the plant is in Vietnam for some reason.
Man, I got a bicycle story for you. So my dad is into biking, and he got one of the last of this like bike, I think like 2020, and it's like he bought the bike, he could have sold the bike for like 3 times what he bought it for. The day he picked it up, he basically called up this shop in Long Island. He ordered it right over the phone. He's like, yeah, I'll take it. He didn't even ask any specs on it because he knew what he wanted. And he basically charged like $2,100 of a bike on his credit card, just like that. No questions asked. It was the guy's like easiest sale. It was the last one in the store in Long Island. We live in Connecticut, and it's crazy. So that's the whole thing, is that bicycles are really expensive right now, is my point. It's super expensive.
What was special about that bike?
It was just one of those like professional bikes that like is sort of like a cyclist, and it was just like one of the top of the lines. But the problem was that because COVID was sort of kicking up and coming down the line, so few of them were coming into the States, and it wasn't another model he wanted that kept getting delayed month by month. And then this was one of the last ones that was in the States. So this was one of the last bikes in the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So there might have been only like 30 of these bikes. And so people who want those bikes are willing to pay for them. But my dad wants it because he's into cycling and he loves his bike. But the idea is that it's a good bike, but there's just so few of them because every factory shut down, materials don't exist. But again, it's super complicated. It's a super complicated thing. I could go through the economics of bicycle making, and
you don't have to. I've been following them for 10 years.
I figured you'd appreciate that. I figured you'd appreciate it.
I'm still riding the 10-speed Trek I bought 40 years ago.
I haven't ridden a bicycle, and I do not intend to start now in probably 15 years. I would much rather drive a car. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more comfortable. And
depends on where you're going. I love two-wheel transportation. I loved all forms of two-wheel transportation.
Well, if you've ever driven a Dodge Challenger that's really souped up and you've gone really fast.
I'm sure that's fun.
That's all I'm going to say. And,
you have one? Is that what you have?
I do not, but I got to drive one, and really, really fun. It had 817 horsepower, and you feel that bad boy. You feel it, and it's a dream car. It's a dream car. When I make my first mill, that's gonna be my toy that I buy. It's gonna be great, and then I'm gonna totally deck it out, and I'm gonna make it like an Akari, which is like I'm gonna like put an anime wrap all over it and put like a Sailor Moon hood on it, and they're gonna be like, "Really, man? Really? It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great."
I like the Cobra Kai version.
Oh, I mean, I like the Cobra Kai version too, but I don't want to be a copycat.
No.
I want to be the original. You know what I mean? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then my other favorite car is an El Camino. So I love an SS El Camino 8, a V engine 8, and they've only made that version, I think, like 2 or 3 versions of that car. And I just love an El Camino because it's the combination of basically a Dodge Charger meets a pickup truck. And it's great.
Dodge did offer that station wagon about 10 years ago, which had the huge Hemi V8. I can't think of the name. They no longer make it, but it was the fastest station wagon ever made.
I love it, and then I have a problem with cars. I have a car fetish and I have a watch fetish. So it's a real problem. Beyond comics, and I have a problem that I like making money too. So I guess I'm an American. What can I say?
I guess.
But anyway, what were you saying about your campaign? Because that's such an aside, but it's so important. Because how far are you done with this project? Because one of my biggest
Private American is done. It's ready to go to the colorist. In fact, half of it's already colored. The only delay is going to be getting the paper to print it. And most of the books that are late these days are printer issues. They're not creator issues. They're printer issues. And especially if you promise it in the spring, because the printer we use, which is AMI, also prints most of the high school yearbooks. And the high school yearbooks are their bread and butter. So you call them up and say, when's our book going to get printed? And they say, well, just as soon as we get through with these high school yearbooks.
That's fantastic. But you know why I ask? Because people want their books and people get frustrated. And I'm at the stage where I'm owed about 5 books, and some of it's creator issues. And if somebody says I'm delayed by a month because of a printer issue, I don't get angry. I get angry when somebody is 14 months late and they are 40% through their book.
Right.
That's when I get pissed, because I trusted you. And then I get pissed off when you have another 2 books that you did 30K on, because now I'm at that point, and there's a particular individual, he knows who he is. And that's when I get pissed off, because I'm like, I trusted you on a dream project, and you're making money and doing really well on these other 2 books. But where is this one that was coming out before that? But I don't think you're that creator.
No, I'm not. We pride ourselves on delivering in a timely manner, and we'll deliver Thin Blue Line on time. Private American. And also, we'll deliver Bronze Star on time. And Bronze Star is our next project. It's a supernatural Western, and it's the greatest work of Pat Broderick's career. It's mind-blowing art. And when you see this, your head's going to explode. In fact, there's an exploding head on the cover, but we hope that won't hold us back if we color it discreetly.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, you're going through this one. Thin Blue Line did great. And then this is going to do fantastic. And I don't know if you're going to be on Kickstarter or where you're going to go, but wherever this project goes, obviously, whether you're zooping it or crowdfunder or Indiegogo backs down, because the second that this thing gets unshadow banned, or obviously people like me are going to push it out. I think Pops Van Zant's going to push it out. I know a few other people who are probably going to help push it out heavily. Obviously, when people hear the fact that, you got a Indiegogo, is rooting against you, you're the underdog in this one in a lot of ways. And I think it's very American to root for the underdog.
Right. The only thing we have to overcome is conservatives' reluctance to invest in the culture.
Yeah, I think it's changing. I think
hope
the
so.
Daily Wire is doing a great job with it. I
They're
think what
making
they
movies.
on $7.4 million, they have $150 million revenue, and they have $100 million burn rate, and they are heavily, heavily investing in culture. And I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for them to build a comic book division because it is
Wouldn't
coming.
that be great?
Ben is a big comic book guy. Where one of his favorite books is Superman Red Son, which is a great, great book. I don't know if you know that one.
No, you
Oh,
can't read them all. There's so many comic books out there.
it's great. So it's not canon, but what would it have been like? The premise is that what would it have been like if Superman didn't land in America because the way the Earth rotates, but he landed in Soviet Russia?
Right. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
about the premise. It is fascinating. I should probably pick that up. The trouble is, I have so much to read right now, and most of it is for work, for novels I'm adapting and books I'm adapting, that it leaves very little free time for me to just read fiction for pleasure. Although I do. I have three books. I got the breakfast book, which is downstairs in the kitchen. I got the bathroom book, which I read when I go in there for obvious reasons. And then I got the book that I'm adapting, which I read in my bedroom. So I'm reading three different novels at once right now.
See, for me, I'm an interviewer and I'm in the wrestling world now, and I do a lot of those, so I have to watch wrestling. And I
Right.
thoroughly enjoy watching wrestling. And so it's wonderful because I get to watch wrestling, which is research, but I get to
Yeah,
enjoy it.
that's right.
And
That's why I went into writing. That's why so many of us went into writing, because we loved stories. We loved telling stories. And we've been lucky to make a living doing something we love. Most people aren't that lucky.
it was crazy that there's been a 6-month feud in this company called H2O in Jersey. And text for text, it has been the ultimate comic book where there has been betrayal, there has been love, there has been issues between a teacher and a student, and it just ended. And the payoff was so good in this match. And there was so much in this War Games match that ended it. And it was like a 6-issue fantastic arc over 6 months. And I've been watching it for 6 months every week unfold. And oh my God, on Monday night, it just ended. And I was like, this has been the greatest comic book that has ever been written.
But it's a live show, right? It's not really a comic book.
I mean, it was all televised, but
Right, right.
it was
Wouldn't
so
it make a
good.
great comic?
But
if-
the script to do this was
Oh, yeah,
so good.
Right.
It was so good. It was unbelievable. And just like how they had the heel turns and how it all built up to a point, because they were telling a good story. And that's what I think people forget,
right.
that a comic book to me is not a comic book. You're telling me a story. I don't
Absolutely.
into a movie, into a novel, into, you could tell it to me in stick figures if it's a good story.
Right.
And that's what I want. And that's why this was so good. And it was 6 months in the making. It was 25 weeks of this. And I'm like, it was almost like 25 issues every single week with special like editions and like pay-per-view events. Oh, it was epic. And it was just, I'm like, man, this was the ultimate comic book that I just got to watch over the last 6 months. But again,
people hunger for stories, and that's why writers will never be out of work.
it was fantastic. But obviously, you got the next one going on, and I'm gonna be very honest with you, that next one's gonna be a hell of a lot easier than the last two.
I hope
It's
so.
gonna be a hell of a lot easier.
I hope so.
But obviously, it's unfortunate that you have had to deal with this.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's good. I don't think it's good for business. I don't think that it's good for comics. Obviously, I think that it's very problematic. Now, I don't know the legality of Indiegogo, if they have the right to do it or not, and I don't want to make any presumptions, but I also think that it's not fiduciary, because the better you do, the more money they make.
That's true. And again, I have to stress that the only thing controversial about it is because the current climate has made it controversial. and that if you were to ask most people whether we should have a secure border or not, most people would be in favor of it. And the news broadcast network news broadcasts, most of them won't cover it because they're not there to present the news. They're there to support the regime. But people are aware of it anyway, especially people on border states, because they see it every day.
Yeah, I think you know what it is. I think that this book isn't. I think parts of it might be a little bit, pushing the line, but I don't think it should be as controversial as it should be. Same thing with Thin Blue Line. Thin Blue Line should not have been as controversial.
No.
But unfortunately, I mean, Eric Bischoff said it best: controversy creates cash. And I'm going to say this the most polite way I can say it. If this wasn't as controversial, you wouldn't have made as much money on both of these books. Because
Well, I'm sure that's true about Thin Blue Line because we got an unexpected boost out of that. I was on Fox News. I was interviewed by the National Police Association, and a lot of the more temperate news sites picked it up and ran with it, and that really boosted our numbers. But this one is a hard sale. I don't know why. I think for some reason people are they're afraid. They're afraid of being canceled, and that's why they don't want to talk about it.
well, I'm cancel proof because I'm self-funded. And so, you know what it is? I'm cancel proof. I mean, I ran a Kickstarter for this show. I barely funded. And again, I am cancel proof. And I think that in the last 10 years, I have proven that, I'm not leaving anytime soon. And while I'm burned out from interviewing comic people, and I'm after you, I think you're going to be the last one for the year. And I'm taking a break doing more wrestlers, cosplayers, voice actors.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for making room for me, especially since I spaced our initial date.
You only spaced by an hour. It's all good. Or not even an hour, like 40 minutes. And I just said, fuck it, I'm going to go for it anyway. But the whole point is that I'm taking a break from comics, not because I just find that people in comics have been exhausting lately. I find that it has been a very, very complicated space on every side, on every funding side. I find that people in comics have been ungrateful for interviews. I really do. And I find that people have been difficult in comics. And I find that people in wrestling, people in cosplay, and people in voice acting have been a lot easier to deal with and more pleasant to deal with, to be quite honest. And it sounds messed up. And all these people, when I'm like, they're like, oh, can I do an interview? I'm like, man, I'm exhausted. And they're shocked that I'm exhausted. And I'm like, I'm tired because I've been doing this for the last, 2 years, almost nonstop. And nobody says thank you. So, and nobody is even understanding like how to be pleasant, or people don't even like half the shit that I do, or even like an interview on Facebook before they ask me. So there's a lot of issues going on, I feel, in comics right now.
Well, send me your address. I'll send you some comics.
I appreciate that. I do. I like your work. So what I've read, I haven't read everything. I did read, I think, what was it? Outlanders or Outworld?
Offworlder. Outlanders is Bodice Ripper, but I enjoy it. But I'll send you some comics you never dreamed existed that will entertain you.
I'm gonna look forward to that, and maybe I'll write a review on it. Because I haven't written a review in a long time. But I do want to ask you a question outside of all of this. It's a very important question, because I know that you did a bunch of work for Marvel. But if DC said to you, and you could plead the fifth at any point, you could plead the fifth, and then we will move on, I promise. But if DC said to you, you could do any character you want to do, and we'll pay you whatever you want to pay, and you get a 6-issue miniseries, what characters would you do from DC? Because I know you've done Marvel. Because I know everybody's got some they want to do. Mine is Teen Titans West.
Well, I did Flash and Deadman for DC, and Deadman was a seminal book. It's the book on which Kelly Jones became Kelly Jones. But I'm trying to think. I'm much
your
more
dream character, your dreams. It's not about money anymore. It's about what you want to do.
I know, but I like to tell very realistic stories, even if they're fantastic or take place in another time or another world. and I'm spacing on what DC has to offer, I certainly would have no interest in doing Superman or Batman or Aquaman or Green Lantern or any of those. It's not because they're not great characters, they are. It's just that at this point there have been 116,000 different Batman stories.
So let me tell you one of my favorite DC stories. It was with Speedy by Denny O'Neil, and it was about drugs. And
Oh, I remember that. Denny was my editor. We went over that many times.
And so me and Denny spoke about that because I got to interview Denny, and Denny's great. And the whole thing about that issue and what he did with that was absolutely wonderful because it was real. It was real. And if you don't know
It was
why,
real, and it didn't lecture you. You know, he was the guy that brought social concerns into comics, but he was also a writer and a storyteller, and he knew how to tell a story. So it wasn't a lecture like these days. You get a lecture, you don't get a gripping story. His story was gripping, and it was about a concern many people had, and he just integrated it smoothly in the DC universe, and that's why it works so well.
and it was very personal in a lot of ways, very personal. And so obviously, but for me, I want to write Teen Titans West, and I don't want to do any preaching. I just want to have fun with Teen Titans West.
Well, since you asked, there is one character, but it's not DC, it's Marvel, and it's Master of Kung Fu. And the reason I would like to do that is because as a martial arts buff, I've been reading that book for decades, and it has yet to contain any martial arts. And I know how to do that. I know how to put it in a book so that it's exciting. And that's why I'd like to write that book.
No, I feel you. I feel you. I know very little about that book. I don't know everything about comics. I know a lot.
Well, I bought a copy last year when they rebooted it. And the editor was Chinese, the writer was Chinese, the penciler was Chinese, the inker was Chinese, and it contained no entertainment value.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. Most things in Marvel and DC are problematic. Every year there's two good books that are really, really well done from those companies. There are some fun stuff that's done.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't read that many comics these days. I'm not the crazy man I used to be, where I would buy every book every Wednesday and take them home and read them. I still read comics, but mostly the comics that I back and the comics that people send me.
I'm very opposite, where I make a lot of money buying and selling comics. So I am
a smart guy.
I'm the problem with the industry. And
no, you're not. I know a lot of people who make a living that way, like Barry Dutter. I don't know if you're friends with Barry on Facebook, but every week he's at another garage sale.
I take it to a whole nother level where I buy a lot of variants and then I sell them. Right. And then I broke down the system where I buy a comic for 20, I sell for 60, I net 20 on the deal because eBay takes a position. I replace the book with another $20 book, and then I invest the rest in the stock market into a good growth dividend stock. And then I just sit quietly and say nothing. And then I just quietly every quarter count my money coming in quietly. And because I know it's going to end at some point, but I'm basically buying hard assets, for lack of a better word. And I'm just climbing the mountain slowly, very slowly, not doing anything fancy. And I'm a little bit of crypto, which I know you do some NFT work. And NFTs scare me. So
Super voice dog. That's what crypto means to me. Well, listen, you've been a great host. I hate to cut this short, but it's bedtime.
So before you go, where could people find you? Where could people back you? Where could people check out what you're doing? All that stuff, because obviously I want people to support you. And before you go to sleep, and I know you got, I think, a pre-recorded Larry Hama interview dropping soon.
Yeah, we interviewed Larry yesterday.
I may or may not be allowed to interview him, but that's a different story for a different day.
I'm on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron. I'm on Facebook at The Comics and Novels of Mike Baron. I have my own website, bloodyredbaron.com. I'm on Substack as Mike Baron.
Well, obviously, you should go support Mike Barron. You should actually back this book because there's a good chance it will get unshadow banned, but there's also a good chance it won't. And you need that link up above in the comments down below or in the description up above, wherever the description is. Obviously, you should seriously back this book because this is a great story. It's going to be a fantastic book. And you're kind of sticking your finger up at the culture a little bit and telling Indiegogo that, hey, you can't, stop us from backing what we want. So that's something to keep in mind. And then quickly about me before we get out of here, everybody. Obviously, all my social media is down below. It's Pop Anime Comics. I appreciate people following me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Obviously, I truly appreciate all that. You can watch probably about 500 interviews on YouTube throughout my entire, culture between voice actors, cosplayers, comic people, and professional wrestlers. It's all free for you to watch. No ads, anything like that. So feel free to watch that, subscribe, because I appreciate the subscribers and everything. And I appreciate comments. And on that note, I'm going to let you take us out.
Well, thank you, sir, for having me on. And the only thing I have to say about my books is they're entertaining, very entertaining.
Well, that is a perfect place to end. And that is a wrap, everybody.